Well, anyway, she just told you, my name is Jeanette, and I'm one of the team of the social committee. Well, thank you. Well, they actually begged me to do 5 minutes of comedy tonight, but I have a feeling it might have been they begged me not to, but I don't hear too well, so for the next 5 minutes, or until Stuart pulls the hook out, I'll just give you a few of my favorite jokes. But one of them made me think of Rick when he was talking about the vasectomy. Last year I told this joke and I laugh every time I hear it. The priest one morning was doing the sermon, and he said, you know what, today I'm not going to preach the sermon to everybody. I'm just going to have the children all come up to the front and sit down in front of me, and I'm going to give the sermon to them. So they all come up and they sit down, and he comes down the steps and he says, now children, he said, what do you know about the resurrection? And so nobody said anything except one little boy put his hand up and he said, well, I know, he said, if you get one for 4 hours, you have to call your doctor. So there you go. Well, ladies, I don't know if you know, do you feel sometimes that your house is haunted? I know mine is, because every time I walk by the mirror, there's this crazy old lady standing there and I can't get to see my reflection. I'm sorry. Well, I was going to just tell you a little tale, but there was some guys in a coffee shop. They'd been playing golf. I beg your pardon. They were in the golf clubhouse, and they were chatting about their game and how good it had been. And they were standing around, and all of a sudden there was a cell phone on the seat beside one of them, and it started to ring. So he bent down and he picked it up, and this girl on the end said, oh, hi, honey, did you have a good golf game? And he said, sure did. And she said, well, I just wanted to let you know, I was at the mall and there was this beautiful fur coat. It costs about $4,000, but is it okay if I buy it? And he said, oh, sure, if you want a fur coat, you have a fur coat. So she said, oh, thank you. Oh, and by the way, when I was going past the car dealership, I saw this Mercedes in there. It had everything on it. She said, it was wonderful. I've bought it. Will that be all right? And he said, oh, fine, no problem. If you want a Mercedes, you have one. And he said, and she said, oh, by the way, I was driving home. I came just past this mansion down the road. She said, it's gorgeous. It's got 6 bedrooms. It's got a swimming pool. And she said, it's even got its own home theater. And she said, I've put an offer in on the house and they've accepted it. Is that okay? And he said, sure. He said, a fur coat, a Mercedes, and a mansion, all in one day. You've done really well shopping. So she says, okay, honey, I'll see you at home. He says, okay, goodbye. And he puts the phone down and he turns to his friends and he said, does anyone know whose phone that was? Well, there was these 2 guys. They were Sam and Joe, and they always went to the park. Every week they went to the park and they talked to the birds and they fed the ducks and talked about general international things. And then they'd been doing it for a number of months. And then one day, Joe didn't show up. And Sam thought, well, that's funny. I wonder where he is. So anyway, this went on. He didn't know why Joe hadn't shown up. And it went on for weeks. And no, Joe never came. And Sam still was going, feeding the ducks. And then one day, it was about 3.5 months later, all of a sudden there's Joe sitting on the seat in the park. And Sam said to him, well, what the hell happened to you? He said, I thought you were dead. And Joe's got a big grin on his face. He said, well, no, actually, I'm not. He said, I was in jail. He said, gee gods. He said, what were you doing in jail? Well, he says, Joe says, you know that waitress over there in the coffee shop where we have coffee sometimes? He said, she must have thought I was rich because she charged me with rape. No, yes, she did. So he said, when we went to court, and he said, the judge said, you know, have you been accused of rape? And he said, yes, your worship, I have, or your lordship, or your sir, whoever you are. And he said, what do you plead? And he said, well, he said to Sam, he said, you know, at 89 years old, I was so thrilled and proud to be charged with rape that he said, I pled guilty. And he said, and the judge gave me 3 months for perjury. There was this gentleman, he was in his late 80s, and he's very proud of himself, walking down the street with this hot chick on his arm, and he thought, this is really good, I'm having a real good time. And his doctor walked towards him, and his doctor said to him, well, you must be feeling pretty good. He said, yes, I am, doctor. He said, I'm doing exactly what you told me to do. I got a hot mama, and I'm going to be cheerful. And he said, no, I didn't say that. I said, you've got a heart murmur, be careful. Thank you, Maya. I'll pay you after. Well, I've just got one little bit of trivia. I don't know if you know that Britain and Mexico are wonderful hosts. They have a connection, and I don't know if you know this, but the Mexicans love mayonnaise. Well, back in the early 1900s, Hellmann's, they made all this mayonnaise, and some of it was being shipped to Mexico. So they had 12,000 jars of this mayonnaise, and so they didn't know how to get it, so they put it on board the Titanic, and it was going to be shipped to Veracruz in Mexico. So they got all these 12,000 jars of mayonnaise, and of course they were going to call into New York first and then on to Veracruz. Well, of course we know they didn't make it because they hit an iceberg and they went splash to the bottom. So the Mexicans were so upset about this that they decided to have an annual day of mourning because of all this mayonnaise sitting at the bottom. I think you know the answer, do you? Oh. So that the Mexicans had this annual day of mourning for their lost mayonnaise, and it's every year at May the 5th, and it's called Cinco de Mayo. It's all right, you can smile, Walt, it's okay. Oh, well, and of course there was this gentleman that he placed an ad in the paper, and he said, looking for a wife. And so the very next day, he got 100 letters back, and each one says, you can have mine. Okay, just before I go to my Irish my Irish jokes, I have one little piece of, I should say, information for Canadians. Now, it's concerning the CRA, and that's either the Canadian Rip-Off Association or the Canadian Revenue Agency. And I just got a little note that came from them the other day. And they said on here, the CRA sent back the tax reform to a Canadian taxpayer because of his answer to one of the questions. And the question was, do you have anyone dependent on you? Well, the man wrote back, yes, I do. 2.1 million illegal immigrants, 1.1 million crackheads, 4.4 million unemployable scroungers, 80,000 criminals in 85 prisons, plus 450 idiots in Parliament, thousands of politicians, and an entire group that calls themselves senators. Well, the CRA didn't like that, and they stated right away that his response he gave was unacceptable. So the man responded immediately, did I miss somebody? Nancy is taping this, and my kids back in stateside said, Mum, can you get Nancy to tape? I'm putting this on because they'll hate it. They'll want to kill me. Okay, there was Mrs. O'Leary there was a knock on her door, and she went to it, and Thomas O'Malley was standing there, and he was her husband's best friend. And she said, what are you doing here? Where's my husband? She said, I thought you went to the beer making factory to have a beer this afternoon. Well, he burst into tears, and he says, I'm so sorry. He said, your husband is dead. What does she mean, dead? He said, well, he tripped and he fell in one of the beer vats and he drowned. And she said, oh my goodness. She said, well, I hope he went quickly. And he said, well, actually he didn't, because he had to get out 3 times to pee. last one, as they Stuart really will bring the hook out. Bridget O'Hara, she came running down the street, went into the church, and there was the priest coming down the aisle, and she saw him, and she was just crying her eyes out, and he said, "What's the matter?" And she said, "Oh my gosh," she said, "my poor Sean, he's just died suddenly." She said, "I don't know what I'm going to do." And he said, "Oh dear, I'm so sorry." He said, "Did he say anything before he died?" He said, "Yes." She said, "Yes, he did, as a matter." He said, "For God's sake, Gladys, put the gun down." Okay, everybody, I'm sure you've had enough, but I do have a parting shot. I know, you knew that, didn't you? If it walks like, you know what they say, if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, you're drunk because ducks don't talk.
Now you know why she's